On today's show, the Capitals will need to see a whole lot more from Sonny Milano in this camp, as there's a lot of players vying for those positions. And is there the possibility that Dylan McIlrath makes the team?
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, including the SiriusXM app and on YouTube. And I want to thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. And the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube and comment anything down below. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about Andrew Cristall, and he is one step closer to making the roster. And what do I mean is there were a lot of roster changes made, a lot of players that were waived and sent down to Hershey. Andrew Cristall still remains. So there's the possibility that he could ultimately break camp with his team. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We'll talk about players that we need to see more of. And a lot of the players that we're talking about, they're penciled in. This guy's going to be here. That guy's going to be there. But still, there's certain players that we'll need to see more of. And Sonny Milano is one of those players. And then in the final segment, we'll talk about Dylan McIlrath. Is there the possibility that he could actually join the Capitals blue line? No one had that circled on their sheet, but his physicality and his leadership speaks volumes. And what kind of makes him a front runner for actually cracking the roster? But just to get it going here, talking about those roster cuts and waves for the purposes of being sent to Hershey, as that was the word over the weekend, that Ethen Frank, Alex Limoges, Riley Sutter, Chase Priskie, and Hardy Häman Aktell were waived for the purposes of sending them to Hershey. And right away, my thoughts, I'm like, well, this is not going to be good. I thought for sure that someone would scoop up Ethen Frank just because he's a fast skater and has a pretty good skill set, put up some pretty good goals for Hershey last season. But alas, those players cleared and are now going to be in Hershey. Kind of always a little bit of a scary moment because some of those, you think it's going to be a flawless transition that, you'll just waive them to send them down to your AHL affiliate. But if there is another team in need, well, sometimes they can just scoop them up. So what this means is that Andrew Cristall, who seemed kind of like an outsider in the regard of making the Capitals roster, very well could. He is edging closer and closer. I think he's also in the mix with Jakub Vrana. And you take a look at it, and I'll talk about later, that Sonny Milano, is there the possibility that he doesn't live up to potential and he is viewed as expendable, making an opening for Cristall and potentially Vrana? There is a lot to consider and a lot of tough decisions that need to be made by Spencer Carberry and Chris Patrick before the season gets underway. But those cuts, those are always hard, as those players are already, looking for their next step in their career, making the NHL. But talking about Cristall, has been making a strong impression during the preseason for the Caps with a point in each of his preseason appearances. That's what you need to do. We know that he showed up really well in his first game he played. Spencer Carberry said he took a step back in the second game that he played, but all things considered has been a very well-rounded player and playing far beyond his years. 19 years old, and there's just a very good possibility that he could crack the roster and make the big team. As we know, he has only 2 options, playing with the Capitals or being sent down to the Kelowna Rockets. Cristall is vying for a spot on the Capitals roster despite facing limited vacancies. His performance is making it difficult for the coaching staff to consider sending him back. I don't think this team is against getting younger and faster if there's a good skill set, and what we've seen from Andrew Cristall so far is good. The tough part, and I've talked about that, is that's why I picked Jakub Vrana as the guy that I thought would crack the roster. But Andrew Cristall's making it tough, and all of a sudden, certain things are drawn into focus. Spencer Carberry saying that he needs to see a whole lot more from Sonny Milano. Is that the possibility that could be Cristall and it could be Vrana on the big team? Those are some things to consider and something I'll talk a little bit more, especially Milano in the next segment. But talking about Cristall's options for the upcoming season, which I spoke of, he has those two options. Has he played so well that he's too good to be playing in Kelowna? Has he exceeded what he needs to learn? And that's the tough position, is that we know he cannot go to the Hershey Bears just based on his age. That's a tough thing. That he's 19 years old. He can't start the season with the Hershey Bears. So it's a tough question. There's not going to be any give-me's. I don't think the Capitals are going to think to themselves that, hey, he's so good that he can't go to Kelowna. He's just really going to need to bring it to prove that he is an NHL quality player. Talking about Andrew Cristall's preseason performance highlights, having recorded a point in each of his 3 preseason games, Cristall has demonstrated high speed. Can we believe that? We're talking about high speed. That was the biggest knock on his game, was his straight line skating, his bursts of energy, and his explosive skating speed. Well, what are some of the things that we know? We know that he hired a coach to rectify that situation, and it seems like it's paying off as he has demonstrated speed, hockey IQ, and ability to win board battles. Has he played so well that the Capitals are like, hey, we don't know how this is going to work, but we're going to make it work somehow? I think we're getting closer to that situation. He has also been given significant ice time during the preseason, a vote of confidence by Spencer Carberry and his assistants, including on the power play unit and penalty kill. I'm here to tell you, something's going to get shook up here a little bit. I did see that I thought it was going to be Jakub Vrana and that, well, hey, there's not any more spots. I'm beginning to think that Sonny Milano might be one of the odd guys out and viewed as expendable. Unless he really turns it on towards the end of camp here in these preseason games, rather, I think it very well could be that Andrew Cristall finds a spot on this team. And if, say, someone like Milano is viewed as expendable, he wouldn't necessarily just have to spend his time warming the bench. He'll be in the lineup. Quite an exciting thing to think about. Andrew Cristall's potential and focus. Cristall's teammates have also acknowledged his skill and positive attitude, highlighting his potential as a player as he competes for a full-time spot on the Capitals roster. Cristall is focused on continuing to showcase his abilities and contribute to the team. And he hangs out with some pretty elite company. He is friends with Connor Bedard. And it's funny that these great hockey minds, these great young hockey minds tend to work together and are friendly. And I know that you can get by in the NHL based on association that, hey, I'm best friends with Connor Bedard, but it's not about that. He is a legitimate NHL player in my assessment. If you're going to ask me on the street, hey, Dan, do you like the Capitals? What do you think of that Andrew Cristall guy? I'd say, I think he's just earned himself a spot on the Capitals. Now, that's going to depend on Spencer Carberry and Chris Patrick if they can find a way to shoehorn him in there somewhere. But I think that he has played good enough to find a way to work into the roster. If he can continue that, now he could totally fall flat on his face the next time he plays. But what we know and what we've seen so far as he has been as advertised and then some. I don't think there's a lot of people. I know that Spencer Carberry thought it was an interesting prospect to have him on this team. As the longest time, this team was viewed as being an old team, one of the oldest teams in the league, but based on necessity is trending in a younger direction. And Andrew Cristall is part of that next wave of great Capitals players. I'm talking Ryan Leonard, even Miroshnichenko, those kind of players are in there. That it's exciting to think about this next wave. And this next wave, and Andrew Cristall in particular, could be here sooner than later. That is an exciting thing to think about as a Capitals fan. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about Sonny Milano and how the Capitals need to see a whole lot more from him. And he's one of the players that if he doesn't bring it, well, there's other guys kind of chomping at his heels saying, hey, I want your job. Can he bring it? And has he run out of time? I'll discuss straight ahead. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And that's one of the frustrating things. My favorite band comes to town, my favorite stand-up comedian, whatever the case might be, and you don't know where you're going to be sitting. You don't know what kind of view of the stage you're going to have from your seat. And our tickets going to even be available. It can be quite maddening. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day, make sure and join the Locked On Capitals Insiders. There's more information in the show description. All right, in this next segment here, we're going to talk about Sonny Milano. And if we want to rewind time a little bit, when he was acquired in the first place, brought to this team, he was viewed as an AHL player. And what happened? He played so well that he found a spot on the roster and has been there. But in his time, in his tenure with the team, it's been a bit up and down. There's been times that he has been lights out and amazing. And then there's been times that his play's been a bit lackluster. But what makes this season a whole lot different than previous seasons is there is real strict and real great competition. I like what I talked about. I'm talking about Andrew Cristall. I'm talking about Jakub Vrana. I'm talking even Miroshnichenko, those kind of players that could very well join this team sooner than later. So players like Sonny Milano, who are kind of hanging out on the outside, like, hey, yeah, man, I'm penciled in. I saw what all the writers are penciled in, and I'm in there. I am that third line left wing. I'm in there. Not so fast. Spencer Carberry has said that we need to see more from him. And if he does not bring it, then he could very well lose his job to a Cristall or a Jakub Vrana. But Spencer Carberry was quite candid about it. He said he is looking for more from Sonny Milano as the Capitals winger faces tough competition for roster spots. When evaluating Milano's performance in training camp, Carberry was candid in his assessment, describing it as just okay. Is just okay going to get you a spot in the opening night roster? Is just okay going to find you a spot on the Washington Capitals? I don't think so. And this is a team, like I said, that there is a lot of competition. There is a lot of younger players and players in general that are looking for jobs. Despite Milano's experience and past production, Carberry emphasized the need for him to ramp up his performance and get into peak form before the start of regular season. With strong competition for roster spots, Carberry stressed the importance of Milano elevating his game quickly to secure his position. And if you're going to ask me right now, and I know that I'm getting ahead of myself, I know that, but as Capitals fans, search your heart right now. If you are a fan, if you're listening on the audio side or watching this on YouTube, quick answer, who would you rather have in the lineup, Sonny Milano or Andrew Cristall? I want your answers quick. I think most of you would say Andrew Cristall's a pretty exciting possibility when Sonny Milano has shown glimpses of greatness. I don't think that Sonny Milano is going to go down as a Capitals fan favorite or just a favorite based on his play on the ice. He's been good here and there, but he's also been poor here and there. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, Dan, you're getting way ahead of yourself. This Andrew Cristall guy on paper is really good, and what we've seen in camp is pretty good. But is that going to translate into the bigs on the big team during the regular season? And all arrows for me point up that yes, he is all that. So I think that Sonny Milano, if he does in fact want a spot on this team, he is absolutely going to have to bring it 100% each and every game. Kind of the same way the gauntlet was laid out for Jakub Vrana that, Spencer Carberry said we need to see a whole lot more from him. Same goes for Sonny Milano. So talking about those roster spots, the upcoming days of training camp will be crucial for Milano as he competes for a spot in the lineup, especially in the bottom six wing position. Carberry highlighted the need for Milano to step up and show his best as other players like Jakub Vrana and Andrew Cristall are also vying for roster spots. And I've said this, and if you're an everydayer of the show, I've said it, is this training camp is going to be one unlike we've seen in quite some time, where that there is some serious battles going out on the ice. And then the final segment, I'll talk about battles on the blue line as well, that it is going to be interesting to see what this team looks like in game number 1 to start the regular season. The importance of Milano's performance. Well, Milano's performance in the final stretch of training camp will be pivotal, as Carberry emphasized the need for him to elevate his game to secure a spot in the lineup for the Capitals regular season opener. It's coming up here on October 12th. Does he have what it takes? We need to see it as we take a look at the lineup and who's going to be in the lineup for the next game. On Monday, it's going to be Vrana, Milano, Radish, Protas, Duhaime, Scarboza, McMichael, Dowd, Lapierre, Wilson, Miroshnichenko, and Pierre-Luc Dubois. Forwards, defensemen, Roy, Alexiev, Sandin, Faravari, McIlrath, and Trevor Van Riemsdyk, and goaltenders Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren is what Capitals PR has listed. So the battles are tightening, and I'll talk about that in an upcoming episode, but there's battles already in net. That Charlie Lindgren was pretty lackluster in his first game, while Logan Thompson was pretty lights out. Could that also be a battle to keep your eyes on? You better believe it. And one thing is glaringly apparent is that you cannot live on former glory. You are going to need to prove your worth in this camp, or you could very well find your spot without a job. That's what's at stake here. So Sonny Milano and a lot of these other players that are kind of on the tertiary, just kind of, just hanging out, I guess I'm going to say, they're going to need to bring it, or it's going to be one of these young-ish players that are going to scoop up a job and take it away from you. That is a shot across the bow of Sonny Milano. Will he accept that challenge? I guess that is up to him. All right, so coming up here after the break, is there the possibility that Dylan McIlrath could join the Capitals blue line? I did not have him penciled in, but I've always loved his game. I love the idea of this. Has he played so well, he's earned a spot on the blue line? I'll discuss straight ahead. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And hey, guys, I am loving watching NFL Sunday, and I have my favorite team, but let's be honest, there is a lot of football being played on any given Sunday, and sometimes you're not that interested in it. But how about if you open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game, all of a sudden those games got that much more exciting. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team. It is every day. Talking about the blue line next and some interesting questions, some battles out there for some players. And in this particular segment, in this particular episode, I am talking about Dylan McIlrath, the captain of the Hershey Bears, a guy that is no stranger to the NHL or the AHL, has that physicality, that intrinsic quality that has been kind of the identity of the Washington Capitals for a lot of years. I think that when the Capitals play some of their best hockey, it's when it's a physical team. I'm talking Wilson. I'm talking years ago about Erskine, that Dylan McIlrath, those kind of guys, they are the physicality. And a team cannot have too much tough customers, shall we say. And Tom Wilson is one of those players. We had one of those in Garnet Hathaway, but we know he's not here anymore. So there's not a whole lot of tough guys, if you will, on the ice. And I don't want a goon out there. I don't want a Reeves. I don't want a Maroon. I don't want something like that. But Dylan McIlrath actually has a good skill set, a solid blue liner. The tough question, however, is where could they fit him in the lineup? But just like I talked about in the previous segment, the battles on the blue line are just as interesting. But talking about him historically, McIlrath, a seasoned player with 12 years of pro experience, has successfully navigated 2 rounds of cuts with the Caps and is now among 29 active players competing for a spot on the roster. Despite spending most of his career in the AHL, the 32-year-old defenseman is determined to secure a position on the Capitals. So 32 years old, not exactly a spring chicken, but not the oldest. And listen, I'm not saying sign him to a 7-year deal and keep him here forever. But what I'm talking about in the 24-25 season, they could use a guy like Dylan McIlrath out there, kind of playing a similar game to Wilson in that physicality department. Anyway, talking about the confidence, and he has the confidence of head coach Spencer Carberry, has expressed confidence in McIlrath's potential to earn a roster spot this season. Highlighting this significant improvement in his game, Carberry emphasized McIlrath's on-ice and off-ice contributions, particularly praising his leadership skills and the positive impact he has had on the Bears. And you take a look at it, there is a lot of questions about who's going to be in. We take a look at the sketched out D pairings. We got Chychrun and Carlson first, Rasmus Sandin, Matt Roy, second pairing, and Martin Faravari in TVR. So who's going to come out to accommodate that? And what about Alexiev? There's a lot to consider. And for that matter, what about Ethan Bear? So it's going to be interesting. If you want to take a look at it, TVR is one of the guys that I kind of thought was expendable last summer. Kind of surprised he's still here right now. There could be a lot of movement. And, some of the things that we don't think about is that, when I drew up my D pairings and my forward line combinations, think about the potential of trades. The Capitals could trade someone away on the blue line as well to open up an opportunity for someone potentially like a Dylan McIlrath. Talking about history and contributions, originally drafted 10th overall by the Rangers in 2010, McIlrath has amassed 75 NHL games in his career, with 9 of those appearances in a Capitals uniform. Known for his gritty style, McIlrath has made significant contributions, including a crucial assist in the Caps playoff clinching win in Game 82 against the Flyers, and featuring in all 4 of the team's playoff games during the 23-24 season. I think he endeared himself to Spencer Carberry and the coaching staff. He brought it. He saw an opportunity, and he made the most of it. A lot of these young guys could take a page from Dylan McIlrath's game. 32 years old, still willing to impress and doing just that. Competition for roster spots with the recent additions of Chychrun and Roy to the Capitals defensive lineup. McIlrath faces tough competition. He will be competing for the role for the Caps' extra defenseman, so not ideal, alongside Ethan Bear and Alexiev. The Caps will have room for only 3 extra skaters when they finalize their 23-man roster on October 7th. So the extra. And I guess I'm going to say that's kind of where he's at in his career, isn't it? I don't think that, I don't think that he is going to be paid. He's going to be skating in the top pairing or anything like that anytime soon. But I think that he could earn more than that, to be honest with you, because you take a look at some of the deep pairings and just the biggest thing is injuries. Injuries are the things that always rear their ugly head. And it seems like the blue line, historically, at least these last couple seasons, has been hit particularly hard. So even if he's viewed as a quote unquote extra, I think he could get more playing time sooner than later. And it's not just injury, it's lackluster play. So say some of the players that are out there aren't bringing it. There is a guy like Dylan McIlrath knocking on your door, ready to knock it down. And then you take a look down even in the AHL. There's all sorts of players that are vying for jobs in this year and coming years as well. I'm talking Vincent Iorio, those kind of players as well. So as this camp heats up, as this preseason heats up, these preseason games, it gets exciting to see who is ultimately going to be here. And I want to know your thoughts. Capitals fans, hit me up on Twitter at DanCaps218 at Locked On Capitals, or on YouTube, of course, and let me know your thoughts. Where could a guy like Dylan McIlrath fit into the lineup? Where could a guy like Andrew Cristall fit into the lineup when it seems like all the positions are kind of spoken for unofficially? I think that these remaining stretch of games are going to be crucial for these younger players that are vying for jobs. When it comes to Ovechkin, I'm talking PLD, Mangiapane, those guys have a job. At this point, they're just working on their game in general, knocking the rust off so they're full go. But for a lot of these young players, and even not so young players, there is a lot at stake. I know I've said oftentimes I don't like to pull for players, but there are certain players whose game I like. Dylan McIlrath is one of those. Andrew Cristall is one of those. So I hope that those guys can make the roster if they are in fact worthy of it, and if they continue to bring it. Ultimately, the ball is in their court. Listen, I want to thank you once again for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Washington Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You are ultimately what makes this show successful. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.